Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome back to another episode where Jaclyn still doesn't know how to do an intro, but hopefully you guys are okay with that because no one's given me any more suggestions, so here we are.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't break it, right?
Exactly, and I feel like that might be a saying from Courtney's dad. That sounds very Courtney's dad-esque.
Yeah, probably. I think he says that all the time. Now that I think about it.
I love those phrases that you just randomly say and you're like, where did this come from? How did this end up in my vocabulary? Who started this?
Yeah, especially because some things are definitely Southern things that I say it, and Kevin is like, what did you just say? What does that mean? And so I'm like, I guess it's a Southern thing, maybe. And then I'm like, or is this a my family thing?
Yeah.
Which is, it's really hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, it is always interesting to see regionally phrases that certain words you can use in some places, but then it's a different word in a different place, you know?
Yeah, one example, so most of Kevin's family is from the north, in the Maryland, Jersey, Connecticut, all that little area. And last summer they had some of their extended family get together, and one of Kevin's cousins is married to someone who's also from the South. So we were playing this game, and she was like, a buggy. And everyone was like, what? And I was like, a buggy. And they're like, we don't understand what you're saying. I'm like, a shopping cart. Are you happy? I knew immediately what she was saying, but everyone else was just like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be a common regional one that people either completely know or just have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Kevin always gets on to me for saying supper.
Mm.
He's like, it's dinner. I'm like, it's the same thing. And I'm cooking it, so I'll call it what I want.
See, my family has always used supper for the evening meal, but I've always used dinner for some reason, so I'm not really sure why.
I think I just use them whichever comes out of my mouth first. It doesn't have one. I'm just like, I'll say this one. I don't know.
Although I think technically, traditionally, supper is lunch and then dinner is your evening meal. But I've never actually heard anyone in real life refer to it that way, but I think that's what I've read in books or something.
Yeah, you guys will have to let us know what you call your evening meal.
Yes.
Is it dinner? Is it supper? Is it some other word that we've never heard of? You never know.
Exactly, definitely. So to swing on over into our crime updates portion of the episode, this week, 16-year-old Micaiah Bryant in Columbus, Ohio, did contact the police because there was a fight breaking out where she was and she feared for her safety, and police arrived and she did have a knife and they shot and killed her. So, again, going back to what we've talked about before with additional training and de-escalation and use of force, and I don't feel like this incident had to end the way that it did.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too, kind of with our next update, where police sometimes just do not know how to de-escalate a situation.
Yeah.
And that is a big, big thing of we need them to learn how to de-escalate.
Yes, definitely.
Common theme today. So also in our last episode, it had just happened. We didn't have much information about the shooting at Austin East High School. So if you're listen to that and you're like, this sounds wrong, it's because we didn't have much information then. We have a lot more now. So 17-year-old Anthony Thompson Jr., he did have a gun in school, and I think it was his girlfriend's mother called the police and they showed up, and he was in the bathroom. And then from what I understand, he was in that bathroom for a pretty long time while they were interviewing people, sorting stuff out, and then they went in there and again, could have de-escalated. I did watch the body cam videos. It is out there. But basically, police started kind of grabbing at him, which his gun went off, and then they immediately shot him. This situation could have been handled significantly better. There's been a lot of protests here in Knoxville, and a lot of people calling for those officers to be arrested. I think at the very least they should be fired because he was cooperating the whole time, basically. And you can hear in the video him kind of being like, wait, like, you're reaching in my pocket where the gun is. Obviously, having a gun in school is not a good thing, but it does not warrant dying. So it's just a really tragic situation. Another situation where you could have been like, hey, put your hands up or put the gun down. Like, he was not pointing this gun at the officers. It just went off in the scuffle. So it's just very sad and very heartbreaking. And, we mentioned a lot of deaths with that school and just a lot of trauma those kids are having to go through right now on top of coming out of COVID, and who knows what happened with that, like, in their lives. Like, just super tragic and super horrible, basically.
Yeah, and again, he was not actively shooting this weapon. He had not shot at anyone so far. It's not like police cornered him after he had shot up the school. He just had the gun in his pocket. Again, we recognize that that was a very, very poor choice on his behalf. But it was 11 seconds from the time the officers entered the bathroom until the time that they killed him. And they just immediately grabbed him, and the gun went off in his pocket, and then they shot at him. So it wasn't a situation where they even told him to put his hands up, to hand over the gun. There was 0 de-escalation attempts, period.
Yeah, and while also the shot was determined to be fatal, they did not try to help him at all. They basically handcuffed him after they shot him, and then an officer started washing his hands over his dead body. So, and they didn't reach out for help. Obviously, hindsight, we know it was too late anyway, but still, like, if you shoot someone, I think you should start trying to revive them. Like, maybe. It's just a situation. And then, I don't know if you saw this, but then KPD posted recently how there's now 77 officers who've completed their de-escalation training. And all this. So people are very angry about that, because they're like, so you have this de-escalation training and you couldn't handle it this time? Because at no point in the video was, like, Anthony Thompson Jr. being, like, aggressive or not cooperating. Like, they tell him to stand up, he stands up. Like, when he was in the bathroom, if you would have been like, all right, just slide the gun out, like, stay in there, like, it could have been handled so much better. And that's the issue, is you can't just keep justifying this. Like, you can't do it.
Yeah.
My thing, too, is, like, when the officer was, like, shooting at him, I was like, this is very dangerous, because you could have shot the other officers. Like, you're in a bathroom thing. I mean, it did happen, like, but I really thought that, like, they could have, like, fatally shot another officer as well, which then Lord knows how they would have portrayed that. Like, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it just seemed very dangerous and, like, not a good move.
Or they could have shot another student who was in the bathroom at the time, because there was another student present, and you're in a very small area with a lot of walls and stalls and things for bullets to ricochet off of, which is ultimately what happened and how the cop ended up shooting himself, because there's just so much going on in such a small area. But in other news, which is actually good news for our crime update corner, previous officer Derek Chauvin was officially convicted on all 3 counts that he was charged with in the murder of George Floyd. So we definitely want to celebrate and recognize this achievement. Definitely really unprecedented for a cop to actually be convicted of murder for a killing that took place on duty. So we want to recognize that, while also recognizing the work that still has to be done, and that this is winning a battle and not the war, and justice is not served, and this isn't over yet.
Yeah, because Derek Chauvin is not the first police officer to kill someone, and he probably won't be the last. And so I don't want them to be like, okay, Derek Chauvin's a big case, let's make him, like, the scapegoat, like, we'll show he's going to jail and that'll shut him up. No, like, this is the first. Like, we got to keep going, we got to keep holding him accountable. And shout out to the girl who filmed this whole encounter, because without her, this would not have happened. I see a lot of people being like, remember, this was the original press release about how a man died due to a medical emergency in police's encounter. And then that video comes out and it's like, So shout out to her because without her, this wouldn't have happened.
And one last final thing before we get started with today's case. Please stop criticizing the bystanders for not doing anything. I just cannot understand this mindset. Especially after they testified at trial and, they spoke about how it felt good to be able to be a part of that conviction, and people are like, oh, well, you could have stopped it to begin with. Are you fucking kidding me? You watched a police officer murder a man in the street with 3 other officers present and paramedics arrive and no one's doing anything. You think that bystander could charge at those all officers and that they would not die? Are you kidding me?
And you've seen what happens when you charge at an officer. They think their life is threatened and they will shoot you. So
exactly.
Those other officers should have stopped him. But as a citizen, you don't have much power there. You really don't.
Exactly. So if you are one of those people, please stop thinking that way because they just wanted to get home to their families that night too.
Yeah. And so those are our updates. Those are our, continuing sadness updates, basically. And we're going to get into a sad case now that we've bantered for a little bit about sad stuff. So hope you're feeling good.
But no one dies, so that's always a plus.
That is true. No one dies. So our sources for this week are the Jena 6 documentary, A Big Noise Film, My Story as a Jena 6 by Bryant Purvis. Good old Wikipedia because, guys, Wikipedia is the best. We all know it. You just have to use it safely. NPR article, a Democracy Now! Article, a Clarion Ledger article, and an NBC News article. So Jena is a small town in Louisiana with a population of around 3,000 people. So the main industries are retail and one Universal Plant Services manufacturing facility. The population is about 85% white and the median household income is just over $30,000. So students at Jena High School segregated themselves, and it was pretty clear where the white students could hang out and where the black students should hang out. And it wasn't necessarily written down anywhere, but Jena was a very much segregated town. Usually, the white citizens stayed in their areas and the black citizens stayed in their areas. It wasn't law or anything, but it was just kind of unspoken rule.
Mm-hmm.
And at Jena High School, the rules for what black students could wear was very strict. So they could only wear certain color shirts, they couldn't have any earrings, and they even minimized certain haircuts they could have. And this was because the school staff said it would be, quote, gang related. And they also had to tuck in their shirts and wear a belt. However, these were not the rules for the white students. They weren't required to do any of that. And they could wear steel toe boots, bring a knife on a keychain, and even bring tobacco on campus.
I mean, obviously, white kids aren't a threat because history shows that time and time again.
You can't wear a red shirt, but the white kid over here can bring a knife. Cool. So on August 30th, 2006, black Jena High School student Kenneth Purvis asked the assistant principal if black students could sit under the big tree in the courtyard. And he said it looked nice and shady, but he knew really only the white students sat there. And the assistant principal told him, sit wherever you want. Sit where you want. I don't really care. So some of the black students made their way over there to sit, and slowly the white students left. And then only a few white students were left, and they were really the ones who were on sports teams with the other black students. So then the next day when students arrived at the high school, they saw 3 nooses hanging from the tree. I did mention Bryant Purvis wrote a book. He says 2 nooses, so we kind of have conflicting, but we'll just include both because we don't know which is more accurate. So they quickly discovered which students were responsible, and the principal recommended that they be expelled, but the superintendent said it was just an adolescent prank, and they were only instead suspended for 3 days. And the white students claimed it was not a hate crime, nor a message to the black students sitting under the tree the day before. They were just inspired by a scene from the movie Lonesome Dove.
Are you really trying to say, first of all, that a noose is not racist? And second of all, it had nothing to do with the fact that just the day before, for the first time, black students sat under your tree. Okay.
Pretty wild coincidence here. So there was no school assembly or any kind of public acknowledgement about this behavior and the fact that it wouldn't be tolerated. Parents were also not notified of the situation. So black students gathered and decided to hold a demonstration by standing under the tree. And a lot of white students took offense to this, and so the situation just got even worse. And fights broke out among both groups, and the black students continued sitting every day, and every day a fight broke out during lunch and in the hallways, and this went on for weeks of just constant fights. And it got so bad, there were at least 2 cops and a dog in every hallway throughout the school. So at this point, the school is kind of starting to resemble a prison. You just got cops and dogs everywhere watching your every move. So parents were so scared to send their kids to school that while Jena averaged 450 students, there were days when barely over 100 showed up. And one day after lunch, the principal called for a lockdown and no one was allowed to leave or enter the building. And after the lockdown, students saw narcotic police, bomb squad, and police dogs searching the school. So hours later, it was revealed that someone had called in a gun threat to the school, and the principal called for an emergency assembly in the auditorium. So as we said before, Jena High School kind of self-segregated itself. Like the white students would be sitting in one part of the auditorium, the black students in the other. So the district attorney, Reed Walters, came to this assembly and told the students, mostly looking at the black students, that he could end their lives with the stroke of a pen. And he said, the next fight, I will make an example of them. So things did calm down for the moment because people were scared of his threats. They're like, I don't know if this is worth it. And then in November, half of the school was burned down. Also in November, a black student named Robert Bailey was beaten by several white students for entering a party with only white students in attendance. And only one of the white students, Justin Sloan, was charged with this beating and was only charged with simple battery, and those charges were later dropped. So a few days later, a white man, Matt Wyndham, pulled a shotgun on Robert Bailey and his friend Theo Shaw at a gas station. So Robert and Theo were able to fight with the man and get the gun away from him. But when police arrived, Robert and Theo were charged with assault and theft of a firearm.
Yeah, for defending themselves against this man who came at them with the firearm.
Even better, the man who pulled the gun on them was not arrested. On December 4th, 2006, students came back to school after being out for several weeks while repairs were made from the fires. On this day, Robert Bailey and Theo Shaw, along with 4 additional black students, Michael Bell, Carwin Jones, Bryant Purvis, and Jesse Ray Beard, beat up a white student, Justin Barker. The assailants ranged in age from 14 to 17, and some reports say that Justin said a racial slur before the fight began, and some say he was friends with the group who was known to have put up the nooses. So there's really no clear information on what happened or why the fight started, exactly who all was involved. You'll see that kind of later. No one can really tell a clear story of what happened, but the fight was over very quickly, and Justin went to the hospital with a concussion, a fractured jaw, and a swollen eye, and he was released shortly and attended a school function that same evening. And Bryant Purvis's birthday was December 6th, and he spent it in jail. And he was not allowed to call his mother at any point, and he didn't even know if she knew where he was. So DA Reed Walters charged the 6 teenagers with second-degree attempted murder and conspiracy and said he would seek the maximum sentence, which was up to 100 years in prison for a kid who attended a school event the same day that he was in this fight. So Bryant kind of brought up a very good point, is that these charges were ridiculous because if 6 boys had beat up one kid, wouldn't there be more damage? Obviously he had a concussion, obviously, all this, but if 6 boys had beat up the one kid, wouldn't he be in far worse condition or possibly dead if this is happening like he's saying it's happening?
And again, this is a second-degree attempted murder charge for a school fight. Courtney, how many fights did you witness in high school?
A lot. Can I tell you guys about my favorite one? Because I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast.
No, I'd rather you did. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, so at our school, you had like a front parking lot and a back parking lot. So if you weren't a senior, you parked in the back parking lot. So I was walking, and it was like the start of school. We were walking up, and we passed by like where the cafeteria and auditorium, there's like an outside little spot. And these girls had started fighting with this other girl. And the one girl, they had ripped all her clothes off. So she was just standing there in her bra and underwear. And they had torn out her hair and were running around her, weaving her hair above like their heads like a lasso and like yelling. And I was just like,
wow.
I'm never getting into a fight. Ever.
You're like, yeah, I'm just going to keep walking to my car.
I'm like, I'm gone. But a lot of fights. A lot of fights.
Yeah, I remember watching this fight between these two girls. The way our campus was, you would have to cross the street to get to the other building, and these girls were just like fighting in the middle of the crosswalk, and she was like grabbing her by the hair and slamming her head into the concrete. So yeah, Courtney and I witnessed a lot of fights in high school, and I guarantee you none of them resulted in second-degree attempted murder charges.
Yeah. Especially for a guy who, I'm not denying he did not have injuries, but he was well enough to be released from the hospital same day and attend a school function. So it is not like he had to stay in the hospital for a long time. Like,
yes,
he had a typical fight injuries. So their bonds ranged from $70,000 to $138,000. And a few of the teenagers' families were able to post bond, but Theo Shaw himself did spend 7 months in prison awaiting trial because his family could not afford the bond. And Bryant Purvis did make bail, and in the media, they didn't really readily report who exactly made bond and who stayed in jail, but according to Bryant, he said 4 of the boys did stay in jail the whole time.
And keep in mind, we mentioned at the beginning of the episode that the average income in this area, or the median income in this area, was just over $30,000 a year. So none of these people have $70,000 to $138,000 to post bail for this school fight.
Yeah.
So all but one person on the school board committee voted for the Jena 6 to be expelled. They were all ordered to not come to school or to be on school premises, and this was especially hard for Bryant because he loved playing football and that was all he ever wanted to do, and now he's just been banned from all school activities. So Bryant then moved to Dallas to stay with his uncle. Dallas was about 5.5 hours away, and his uncle was more like a brother to him because he had lived with him and his mom for a while. And his uncle, Jason Hatcher, was a defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys. Jason Hatcher is also the uncle of Tennessee Titan defensive end Jeffrey Simmons. So in case we have any other Titan fans out there, that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, this was like such a crazy connection because in his book he was like, yeah, my uncle was a Dallas Cowboy. And I was like, who's your uncle? And I was like, oh my gosh, there's like 50 different connections here. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So Brian said that it was such a shock to him in Dallas because of how integrated the schools were and how acceptable interracial couples were, and people actually spoke to him and smiled at him, and this just really surprised him after living in Jena.
And it's also, 2006, which is supposed to be a lot of years after, like, all the civil rights things. You would think there'd be more progress.
Yep. However, when Bryant went to enroll in school in Dallas, he was told that he was unable to because of the expulsion in Jena. So he then had to move back to Jena, and later Bryant got a call that a school in Monroe, Louisiana would take him, but it was an all-boys private Christian school that did have a tuition. So tuition was $160 a week, but his mom was determined to make it work so that he could have an education and play sports again. After the school year was over, Bryant moved from Monroe back to Dallas because he did not want to go back to Jena. So the white residents of Jena didn't understand why the black families were citing race as a factor in the harsher charges. And the town librarian, who was in this documentary and looks and sounds exactly like you imagine she does, was quoted as saying, "We don't have a race problem. It's not white against black. It's crime. The nooses? I don't even know why they were there or what they were supposed to mean. There's pranks all the time of one type or another going on, and it just didn't seem racist to me." I'm sorry. The nooses hanging from a tree after the black students sat under them for the first time didn't seem racist to you? The nooses didn't seem racist to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy too. And like Bryant speaks in his book about a lot of like the local high schools like would play pranks on each other, but they would never do something like this. It was just, like stupid high school stuff. It was never like directed at race or anything like that. And so that's why they were like, this is not just a prank. Like, no, like we don't do that. Like, no.
Yeah, there is a big difference between the pranks that high school students play against each other and hanging a literal noose from a tree. So widespread protests began throughout Jena by those opposed to the harsh charges the boys were facing for, again, a school fight, especially following the multiple incidents of fights initiated by white students who faced no charges. So, Courtney and I are not saying that these 6 boys were in the right for beating up this kid. Not at all. But they got into a fight at school, and many other people at this point have gotten in fights at school, and none of them have been charged with second-degree attempted murder.
Yeah, and we also saw other white students beating up a black student and a white man in town pulling a gun on 2 of the younger black kids. So they never really got any charges. They were dropped. So it's like, you're going to, charge them with attempted second-degree murder when you guys also beat up this guy, all this stuff, and no charges? Like, can we just have some equality here? Can we all just get charged with just some simple assault here?
Yeah, exactly. It's just insane. So the black community really came together to protest this, and the parents of the boys even made signs saying justice for the Jena 6. This case was also known nationwide. Bryant did speak in his book of many death threats that were being called into his house to kill him and calling him the N-word.
And how terrifying that must be, because you're like, they're calling my house so they know where I live.
Yeah.
So, like, constant fear.
So, Michael Bell's court-appointed lawyer said that he didn't consider race as an issue in this case. And when he was asked if he was concerned about the all-white jury, he said, "I don't care if they're purple, are they fair and impartial?" And his attorney never visited him in jail to actually speak with him and didn't call any witnesses at trial to testify on his behalf. However, Bryant's attorney said that he could get him off with a clean record. No jail time or anything. All he had to do was admit that he saw Michael hit Justin. Bryant said that he did not see Michael hit Justin, and he didn't see anyone actually touch Justin. And Bryant's attorney, was so mad that he yelled at him and left his office immediately because he refused to lie to him, basically.
Yeah, they were basically wanting to make Michael Bell, like, just throw it all on him. Be like, all right, we'll just get this one kid or whatever. And clearly his attorney was doing, like, not even the bare minimum.
Exactly. And a defense fund had been set up for the Jena 6, but one of the guys jokingly posted a photo of himself on social media with money hanging out of his mouth. So things did really get blown out of proportion with this, and rumors were spread that they were spending the money on other things and not their defense. The Jena 6 was also invited to the Black Entertainment Television Awards to present, but only Bryant and Carwin were able to attend. And I know there was some controversy around that because people are like, is this really the role model that we want for our children at these awards? Like, you're only famous because of this fight that you got into, that you received these horrible charges for, but is this the kind of person we want, serving as a role model? So there was some controversy with that. So Bryant was attending school in Monroe, and his car was vandalized, so he grabbed the person who did it by the neck and pushed his head into a table. He then walked away but was later arrested, and of course this made news across America. He was placed on a 10-day suspension and on probation for a year with the school and had to take anger management classes. So finally, the time came to end this case. The Barkers were ready to move on, and the other 5 defendants pleaded no contest to the reduced assault charges and received 7 days of probation, a $500 fine, and court costs. They also had to issue an apology. Bryant was told a no contest plea is not a guilty plea, it's just an acknowledgement that there was evidence of possible guilt, and obviously this was much better than the possibility of life in prison.
Yeah. But also those poor 4 other boys who basically spent 7 months in jail for basically nothing.
Yes, exactly. So Bryant said that they all found out in court that statements had been drafted that they all placed the blame on Michael Bell, but that was not true. The charges for Michael Bell were reduced to aggravated second-degree battery and conspiracy, and he was found guilty and facing 22 years in prison in December of 2007. Protests continued after Michael's conviction and drew 20,000 demonstrators. I'm not really sure the chain of events after this, but that conviction was set aside, and Michael did plead guilty to second-degree battery and received a sentence of 18 months. Justin Barker sued all 6 teenagers and was awarded $22,000 for medical bills and $7,000 for damages. So Bryant Purvis was later accepted into Ranger College in Ranger, Texas, and he played basketball for them for 2 years and graduated with his associates in science. He then played for Southeastern Louisiana University for a year and then transferred to Grambling State University. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in business management, and he eventually opened his clothing line Checkmate in November of 2013. Michael Bell graduated from high school after serving his time and went on to play football at Southern University. Jesse Beard, who was the youngest of the defendants and only 14 at the time of his conviction, moved to Connecticut to stay with a friend of his attorney so that he could attend school there. After graduating, he attended Hofstra, where he majored in legal studies and business and received an academic scholarship. Robert Bailey moved to Georgia to finish high school before attending Grambling, where he played football and was in the ROTC. Theo Shaw studied political science and history at Louisiana University Monroe before finishing law school at the University of Washington on a full scholarship. He did intern with the Innocence Project while in school, and he passed the bar and was sworn in as an attorney in 2019. He does maintain his innocence and says that he was never actually a part of this fight. Justin Barker remained in Jena and worked for an oil rig in Texas and traveled back and forth. And those are the latest updates that we can find on this group of teenage boys. Obviously, they did go on to lead productive lives once the majority of the severe charges were dropped out of their way.
So yeah, that is the story of the Jena 6, which I hadn't really heard of, and it's just kind of crazy that all this happened, and just, it shows what the world's like even today, all these years later. So fun. Such a fun life.
Yeah, and this was in 2006. This wasn't so long ago that it would make sense. And again, we want to reiterate that we do not think that these boys were in the right for getting into this fight and assaulting Justin the way that they did. However, you can't ignore the difference in the charges that were brought against them versus no charges being brought against the other students, and the fact that only the black students were charged with these extreme charges, whereas the white students were not. You cannot ignore the racial discrepancies there.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll ever really know what happened in that fight. I know Bryant said he didn't know what happened, that he didn't really see Michael hit him or anyone really hit Justin. And he also said, though, if he did know that, he wouldn't have told his attorney. He's like, I wouldn't have thrown anyone under the bus. Even if I did know, I would not do that. I know what you guys are doing. But
yeah, and like we said, the eyewitness accounts differ very greatly on all sides, so we'll never really know what happened in this fight, but the people who were clearly in the wrong were the district attorney and the people on the school board and this librarian and the people who are in these children's lives to better their lives, and yet they're so eager to place these extreme charges on them to prevent them from having a positive future.
And I think it's really important to also something I learned about when I was studying criminal justice is how much of an impact having like a criminal record as like a youth affects you. Because even though, usually when you're 18, it's like sealed. A lot of times, like if you're already like not in the best situation, all this, and you already have that, and you're like, well, why would I stop? Like I already have a criminal record. What does it matter? Like the whole mindset of it can really, really affect people. So things like this, like thankfully, it looks like most of, these men were able to go on and, be successful. But a lot of times it doesn't necessarily end that way. And it can just really just, determine the rest of their life.
Yeah, and I really think that these boys were able to turn their lives around the way that they did because of the huge amount of support that they received because of these charges. Mm-hmm. So because they had the community behind them, because a few of them had good attorneys and they had parents that supported them, because they had these good supports in their lives who were seeking out other schools and those types of things, that really helped them to end up where they did. I don't think they would have if they didn't have the same level of support.
But yeah, that is the Jena 6.
So Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
Okay, so it's been an eventful week. So I feel like I have a lot of things I could choose to be my perk of the week. So I'm just going to talk about like the nice weekend I had last weekend. I got to see my best friend Jaclyn. I don't know if you guys know her or not, but I got to see her and we got to celebrate her and her little baby that's going to be here soon. And then I got to hang out with a few of our friends Sunday and I got day drunk and it was super fun. And I took a nap at like 7:30 and it was everything I've ever wanted, to be honest. Like, just getting day drunk, like when you're out in the sun and you're just chilling and then you get to go home and you just take a little nap. It doesn't get much better than that, guys.
But that really is the best.
Yeah. So yeah, that is my perk of the week. It was just a nice weekend, getting to, see people safely. I safely saw people. Don't worry, there were masks. I have a vaccine. It's fine. But yeah, so that is my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week, as you already mentioned, Courtney, we got to see each other and we got to have a small, spaced out, outdoors, masked, socially distanced, all that good stuff, baby shower. So that was lovely, and getting to see some of my family and friends and just feel all this love for our baby girl who is going to be here so soon, who may already be here at the time that you guys are hearing this. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. She's a drop-in. She's like, I'm getting ready, Mom. I'm ready.
Yes, she is definitely almost ready to go. So we'll see how quickly she's here. And hopefully you guys are not tired of us talking about my baby yet, because it's only just beginning. It's just gonna keep going from here.
Yeah, it'll never end. Basically, like our nationwide shooting segment, Jaclyn's baby segment, is also coming. It's happier.
Yes, definitely a much happier segment. And, if you compare the two, I think we're doing okay. So hopefully you guys don't mind.
Very, very true.
So yeah, if you want to talk to us about your babies or, anything else, as always, you can find us on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at CAF Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod. You can find us on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, or you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. Also, if you feel so inclined, you can head on over to patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes, where for a small monthly fee, you can receive bonus content and extra goodies and all kinds of fun stuff. So definitely check us out over there as well.
And we are still doing our Apple reviews giveaway. Once we get to 50, we will choose someone and they will get a pin, a sticker, and a $10 gift card to the coffee shop of their choice. So go on and do that. Just anybody's phone you can grab, give us a review, just leave some identifying information, take a screenshot before you submit it, send it to us so we can put your name down. Just put your name or something in there. Don't put like your date of birth or your social. That's giving people too much information.
Not that kind of identifying information.
Not that kind. We don't want you to get hacked. That would be bad. But yeah, so in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.